This is the 14th American Renaissance Conference, and therefore it is the 14th American Renaissance Conference that Sam Dickson will bring to a close. This means it's the 14th time that I introduce Sam Dickson to this audience. One doesn't want to repeat oneself ad nauseum, so I will just stick to the essentials. Mr. Dickson has been a courageous, indefatigable champion of our people for longer than many of you have been alive. He's paid a very heavy price, professionally, for his dedication to our cause at a time when our cause seemed nearly lost. He will go to his grave knowing that he did his duty. He's also a friend and an inspiration to me. I present to you Sam Dickson.
Praise from the great and good Jared Taylor, stay up here, is praise indeed. As I said by James Edwards, there are millions of people who will die for the revolution, and there are very few who will work for the revolution. Like James Edwards, only long before James Edwards, Jared has been working for us, our cause. I remember in the 1980s when I first met a Jared Taylor, who was then darker haired and had more hair, at a little conference, a meeting we held in Cashiers, North Carolina, where people were asked to present papers on the subject of breaking out of the ghetto, how we could break out of the ghetto into which the establishment had put us. Only one of the people there who presented the paper ever did that, and that was Jared Taylor, who unveiled his plans to create American Renaissance. I can't claim any role in it, except that I was fortunate enough to host the conference at which the project was unveiled. But no one has done more for our cause than Jared.
As I said, friend and inspiration.
We owe him a round of applause today, and his people owe him eternal gratitude. We also owe a note of thanks to his loyal subordinates who have helped create this and who worked very hard to make this conference a reality. I am very honored to be here. I'm honored to be in your presence. This is the finest gathering of people, I suspect, in the United States of America or maybe the world today. I don't think that's exaggeration. The people who have gathered here today have done so at considerable financial sacrifice, but also at considerable personal risk. All of you know those risks. Some of you, I have the pleasure of being one of them, has paid a price for involvement in our people's struggle for its destiny and its ultimate triumph. It is no small matter, that which you undertake, and those who cannot undertake it should retire from the battlefield, and those who can fulfill their duty should hunker down and persevere. I don't know of any group that could be assembled like this. I attend many meetings. I've attended many meetings in my life, Young Americans for Freedom meetings put on by National Review and William F. Buckley Jr. I've attended groups put on by various conservative groups. I don't really call myself a conservative, as you know, but I wish these people well. I don't know any group, whether it's Lew Rockwell or Chronicles or National Review, that can put together an audience of this caliber, of people as true-hearted, as brave, as intelligent, as well-dressed as the people in this room, especially the young people. I've listened to many people thanking me for what I supposedly have done. I'm proud of what I have done, and I'm glad to have been involved in these activities since before I could drive a car. But I have not done nearly what I could have done, and I have not done nearly what I should have done. I have thanked those who have thanked me. I think it's a very rude thing to rebuff someone who gives you a compliment. I have a habit that you should accept a compliment graciously, even if it is not deserved, and you should return it to the person who gave. You should return a compliment to the person who compliments you. This was part of my training in childhood, and it has stood me well in life. My mind goes back in thinking of the young people who are here today. to a very touching picture, or movie, which I used to see many times when communism was flourishing, if it ever flourished at all. It was a movie, a newsreel that showed the release from prison of Cardinal Mindszenty in Budapest in 1956. During that brief period, when the Hungarians appeared to have broken free and to be able to pursue the route that Austria was able to pursue of being an independent free nation, no longer subject to Soviet occupation. Cardinal Mindszenty, who here knows who Cardinal Mindszenty was? Cardinal Mindszenty was the leading Roman Catholic in Hungary, and he had been arrested by the Soviets, drugged, tortured, forced into false confessions, and held in jail for almost 10 years before the Hungarian Revolution, and subjected to terrible treatment, which he had borne very bravely and in a Christian manner. His first words when he emerged from prison were not about himself. They were addressed to the youth of Hungary, in which he congratulated the brave young men and women of the fatherland who have achieved this great victory for Hungary. Unfortunately, that victory, as we know, was very brief. Within 5 or 6 days, the Soviets reoccupied Hungary, and Cardinal Mindszenty had to seek refuge in the American embassy, where he lived for most of the rest of his life. At the Soviet intervention, of course, urged by Eisenhower on his friends in the Soviet Union, as part of the charade called the Cold War, in which the system in America pretended to be opposed to communism and engaged in a sort of a shadow boxing with the Soviet system. But I can say with Cardinal Mindszenty that thank you to the youth of our country and of our race who are gathered here today. I see in you the same type of person who were the fighters in Budapest in 1956. I want to say something about critics of our cause. There's a magazine to which I have subscribed and continue to subscribe, and which I wish well, which about 2 months ago ran what I feel was an uncharitable attack upon white nationalists and the alt-right. This magazine is called Chronicles, and the chief article was written by a person whom I know and whom I respect. I would like to call him a friend. He is of such elevated social stature above me that I think it would be inappropriate for me to claim to be his friend without him claiming me to be my friend. That person is named Chilton Williamson. I felt then and feel now that there were valid points that Mr. Williamson made about our movement, but there were also those that were far afield from the truth. I know there are people here who are active in the Chronicles circles. There are people here that are active in other circles, like that of the Lew Rockwell libertarians. We wish these people well. We want to work with them. We need their sympathy, and they need our sympathy, even if they don't know it. One of the things that I took that surprised me in the article attacking us was that I read that there are no Christians, and specifically there are no Roman Catholics. Mr. Williamson is a convert to Roman Catholicism. That we have no Christians and we have no Roman Catholics, and that we are all opposed to the Roman Catholic Church, and we hate the Roman Catholic Church. In case this ever gets back to Chilton, I'd like to see, do we have any Roman Catholics in the audience today? Would you please raise your hand? Well, this must be an astonishing discovery. You do not exist. How did you come to be here? We're not going to give up on Chilton. Chilton has done a lot of good work on immigration. We're not going to give up on others. We should never give up on a racial comrade, especially those who share so many things with us. I think back, since it is a Sunday, and like Jared Taylor, I grew up marinated in the Presbyterian religion. I think back to the story of Moses coming down from Mount Sinai with the law, the Ten Commandments. And when he came down from the mountain, he saw the children of Israel worshiping a golden calf, a graven image. And Moses was enraged at his people, and he smashed the tablets of the law. For that sin, he was denied the right to enter the promised land. Now, that was left to another generation. I feel like Moses, and that I don't think I will live to see the people in this room, many of these young people, enter our promised land. But there is a point behind this shattering of the law, the tablets of the law, and that is, you do not give up on people because they fall short of what they ought to be. You bear with people. You don't shatter the law because people break the law. And we need to view our people with charity. It's hard to do sometimes. Our people are not what they once were. We have many people, many racial brothers and sisters who are really terrible people, who really engage in attacks upon us. But I think you never give up on a racial comrade. And that's true of the news media. I expect we will have unpleasant news reports from this meeting, but we have to understand that these journalists are human beings, as we are, and they are the products of their education. They also have their jobs to maintain, and we should never give up on them. We should have an open hand and an open heart toward them because they are our people. Now, the system that opposes us, it masquerades as a humanitarian system. They're deeply concerned about human rights. They're committed to democracy all over the world. They're opposed to racism. They care deeply about children and empowering people. But actually, when the system is analyzed, we see something very different. And we see something very different in the system and its supporters. Let's run over some of the positions that the system has taken. First of all is its attitude toward the white race. The very fact that you care about the white race makes you a demon in the eyes of the system. You're a terrible person. You're a racist, to use the word that was applied to the beautiful lady that just spoke to us from Belgium in describing her prosecution by the Belgian state. Racist. All of us in this room know, of course, that the term racist did not exist in the English language until the 1930s, when it was invented by one of the most brutal and horrific mass murderers in human history named Leon Trotsky, who invented it as a semantic weapon to attack white Christians. And it is a semantic weapon. It is simply a vicious semantic weapon. Therefore, since the system says we are racist, anyone who believes in even the survival of the white race, much less its advancement and ultimate triumph, is an evil person. The only moral solution in the eyes of the system to the white race is that we must disappear. The only moral solution to this, the only moral way to deal with our race is that it should disappear. This genocidal program is not a program of love. It is not a program of humanitarianism. The system also views the working class as a pathology to be cured. This was made explicit in the right hand of the system, a National Review, recently when an article was run just flat out saying in plain English, the white working class should disappear. Not even in the wildest exaggerations and predictions of the Marxists could anything so reactionary, so classist, have been created as the article in National Review. Nor is this unusual. Basically, the system views blacks as a problem that has to be solved. Blacks have to be turned into white people. They have their equivalent to what we want, what I want, which would be a generous separation, geographic separation, so that the two races could live apart. Their solution to what they view subconsciously as the black problem is that the blacks must become chocolate-covered white people. They don't really love black people. They seek to uplift black people, to make the black people over into white people. When I was in my early teens in my parish, the Presbyterian Church, the liberals got together and had a big meeting to discuss how they needed to bring black people to our parish. And I had just been confirmed and could actually say something in the church, and I embarrassed and enraged my parents who thought that I should be obedient young person and not speak in the presence of his elders, I made the point that why don't you go to their churches? Why do you think that they need to come here? And that is really, it's presumptuous of these people to think they can make over the working class and that they have to solve the working class. They have to solve black people. They have to solve Southerners and bring them up to their level and make them over into images after themselves. This is really a profoundly egotistical, self-centered, presumptuous, racist, classist attitude. On the subject of working people, one of my best memories of my father was when I was in elementary school, and I got into a fight with another kid named Nicky. And so the teacher gave me a note to take home to my father to tell him that I had gotten into a fight at school. So my father was a pretty harsh and difficult guy. I was not pleased to have to take this note to him. But I took it to him, and he read it, and then he said, "Tell me about the fight." And I began trying to explain how I was justified in fighting Nicky. And I decided to sweeten the soup, so to speak, by telling him that Nicky's father was a ditch digger. My father reached out and grabbed me by the lapels of my coat and jerked me to him, and he said, "I'm not so much concerned about the fight, but that priggish remark about how someone works bothers me." And I knew he was very angry. I've never forgotten what he said. I knew immediately that he was right, that anyone who does honest labor is entitled to be honored and respected, and that he was that he did not want his son to be a little prig, as he called me, and to sneer at people and scorn them for the nature of their work. That is not the attitude of white liberals and the system. The system has no respect for working people. You'll hear them say, "Well, he's a lawyer, but his father was only a foreman in a mill, and his grandfather was only a mill worker." This is the kind of thing you hear from the disciples of Eleanor Roosevelt. These are not nice people. Now, this system hates us. We all know that. We are, as Morris Dees said right after the 9/11 bombings, as I think it was either Dees himself or the Southern Poverty Law Center, that we must never forget that the fundamental threat comes from the white people, from the white racists. He was disturbed that maybe the persecution of people in America might shift from people like us to Muslim immigrants. Now, I want to sound a cautionary note to this very enthusiastic and deservedly enthusiastic crowd about what the future holds for us with the system. And I want to start out with discussing the three stages of system oppression, of system dealing with dissident movements and ideas that threaten its existence. The first stage is the silent treatment. And we see the silent treatment. I've seen the silent treatment. I saw it, seen it throughout my life, that activities of people like the older people in this room went unreported. They were simply spliced out of existence. I once wrote a letter to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. They had run an article reviewing some paper or book, trying to find out who was to blame for the Southern accent. Now here again, this is a remarkable statement, showing both the depravity of Southerners, the squalidness of Southerners who write for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, our racial brothers and sisters, on whom I'm not giving up, and the attitude toward white Southerners. The way we speak is something for which somebody must be blamed. And I wrote a letter to the editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I took difference with that article, and I explained the origins of our speech. And I also pointed out that the way we speak is closer to the way the royal family in England speaks when they are among themselves than maybe any other dialect in America. The Atlanta Journal ran that editorial, I was later told by a friend of mine who worked in the Atlanta Journal that there were people who were upset about this and contacted the paper. And the paper actually has a list of people whose editor letters are not to appear in the paper. And I was on that list. And so even though it didn't touch on any of the really radioactive subjects, merely because it was written by me, the letter was not to be published. So this is the silent treatment. You don't let people know about them. You seal them off. You immure them behind a wall of obscurity. This works very well, and it worked almost perfectly before the internet interfered. In the days when I grew up, when we had only 3 television networks, all of whom had identical points of view, and all of the newspapers, the only daily newspapers and magazines, all of which had the same point of view, the internet has interfered with that, and so the silent treatment is not working as well as it did. When the silent treatment doesn't work, the second stage of system persecution of those who seek its change or its removal is the attack, the smear. You're a racist, you're an anti-Semite, you're a Holocaust denier. In my case, you're a financial swindler in the totally untruthful article the Southern Poverty Law Center has on the internet about me, an article that can be factually disproven point by point, but which they know is false, but which they maintain because they have absolutely total contempt for the truth. And they know that a doting media will never call them to account, that they will never forfeit their credibility with the media itself, although there are signs that the SPLC is hurting badly in public credibility, and it will hurt more, I assure them, in the future. But the smear then comes into effect. Ultimately, though, if both the silent treatment and the smear fail, there is the third method of system dealings with its opponents. And this is the stage that I think we may be at now, and this is the cautionary note that I want to sound to you. The third method is to co-opt. It's to take over the opposition. The system abhors a void. That's why the system created groups like magazines like National Review, edited by a person who is now acknowledged to have been a CIA agent, who claimed to be leading the movement to turn history around in its tracks. Government intelligence agents don't lead opposition movements to the system. That's axiomatic. But they created organizations like Young Americans for Freedom and then put the blinders on, that you couldn't delve in to a whole list of forbidden subjects, race leading almost at the top of the list. I think you've already seen this in other ways. Some of the people, the talk show hosts that have been set up as conservatives and who sometimes talk a Trump line. But I would predict that there's a reasonable possibility that in the future you will have acceptable groups like VDARE and acceptable groups like American Renaissance. And you will have spokespersons for our cause who will be able to get the television appearances that Jared Taylor or Peter Brimelow cannot get. These people, of course, will channelize, misdirect, and contain the opposition to the system. Americans love what is new, and Americans, as General Patton said, love winners. There will be an enormous temptation and impulse among Americans who share our personality to say, oh, this new group it's really going places. That's where we need to be. We need to go with this. He's appearing on CNN. We need to remain led by ourselves. We need our movement needs to be led by the kids, by people like the kids in this audience who have come when there was nothing to expect but blood, sweat, toil, and tears. People of proven loyalty. We must not be deceived by those who appear suddenly to great media acclaim and who come out of nowhere. I also want to say a few words about sacrifice. All of us here know the risks of movement involvement. We're willing, some can take more risk than others. I was fortunate in life to be a lawyer with his own practice, and although damage could be done to me by the attacks, they were not fatal, and I could, by dint of hard work and personal thrift and resourcefulness and adaptability, I could make my way forward in life financially. So I could take those risks, and I was willing to take the risks. Some of you cannot take those risks. And I want to say that there is no shame in taking reasonable precaution in your life. A soldier is of no use to the Army. The finest soldier in the Army is of no use to the Army if he has gone 24 hours without a full canteen. There is nothing wrong. In fact, it is a virtue to seek financial solvency. This was one of the teachings of the Presbyterian prophet John Calvin, one that I still believe that is very true, that financial solvency is a sign of God's inner grace. Without financial resources, things like this American Renaissance Conference cannot take place. All of you have the right and duty to take reasonable precautions. Think, for instance, on Kim Philby, the famous communist spy, or Harry Dexter White, the communist spy in the Roosevelt administration who engineered the war with Japan in obedience to instructions from his Soviet controllers. Had they come out and worn a little red badge with a hammer and sickle on it and flaunted their views about communism, their contribution to the communist triumph in the first half of the last century would have been nil. So I would go so far as to say that we owe no duty of truth to those who would persecute us. When Jesus was asked by the Pharisees if Jews should pay the tax to Caesar, he didn't give them the truth. He avoided the question. He said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, render unto God that which is God's. And he didn't give them a straight answer. And he didn't owe them a straight answer. The Pharisees weren't really seeking to know. They were seeking to find a way to undermine him. If he said you should pay the tax, then the Jews would turn against him. If he said you should not pay the tax, they would go and rat on him to the Romans, and he would go to jail. So there was no duty for Christ to give a truthful answer to the Pharisees. And I think there is no duty for a college student, for instance, in a class at Harvard, to reveal to his professor that he's a Southerner and he approves of the South, and therefore get flunked out of the course. When you're dealing with a liar, when you're dealing with somebody who intends to use information to hurt you, there is no immorality in taking reasonable precautions to protect yourself from someone who is ill-willed. Now, some of us have suffered here in America. People tell me, oh, you know, you've really had a hard time, and I've taken my blows, but I'm still on my feet, and I do not at all regret involving myself in this struggle based on what I have experienced so far. We'll see what I will think in the future. But when you consider our sufferings, they're very small. They are significant. People in this room have hunkered down and struggled through 30 and 40 years of a difficult life to keep the flame of truth alive. Our comrades in Europe have suffered far more. The people who have spoken here from Belgium, not to mention the one from Estonia, the Belgians didn't even allude to the sufferings they have had. Things like the criminalization of the predecessor party to the Vlaams Belang. When the Vlaams Bloc, their predecessor party, won the elections, Belgium, a NATO nation, a great democracy that people like Hillary Clinton talk about all the time, a part of the free world, was faced with a problem. The people hadn't voted as Nanny wanted them to vote, and something had to be done, and something was done. They simply declared the victorious party a criminal organization and ordered it disbanded. When a so-called fringe group in Greece, the Golden Dawn, won seats in the Greek parliament, well, something had to be done there. And so they were arrested and put in jail because initially the media, to the extent it was reported at all in America, which was essentially nil, the media said that the party was running a conspiracy to kill leftists and social justice warriors. The killer, this is based on a killing in a fight between one guy and another guy. The guy who killed the leftist was claimed to be at first a leader of the party. Then he became a member of the party. But the ultimate fact that was not revealed to the American people was he was someone who voted for the party. And based on the fact that this killer in an individual murder voted for the party, the members of parliament were arrested and put in jail and are now facing criminal prosecution. There was not one peep of protest from the American State Department or Hillary Clinton or any of these people when the Belgian government criminalized the victorious party or when the Greek government jailed the elected parliament members on what is obviously a preposterous and fabricated legal theory. What would have happened, do you suppose, if Putin were to do either of these things in Russia? You think little Hillary would manage to find her voice? Sure she would, because Putin expelled the oligarchs, and Hillary is owned by oligarchs. And Hillary does not like it, or more especially, Hillary's owners do not like it when someone like Putin comes along and interferes with the 1%'s plundering of the 99%. And on that issue, we can agree with Bernie Sanders' white supporters who have rejected Hillary in the Democratic primaries. We know what they would do by comparing the reaction of the American, in quotes, government to what happened in Kosovo as opposed to what happened in Crimea. In Kosovo, Muslims were seeking to detach a historic part of Serbia from Serbia, and the Serbians didn't want that. So America had to bomb Serbia to force the Serbian Christians to agree to turn Kosovo and the Christian minorities still living there despite persecution by Albanian Muslims to submit to Albanian Muslim rule. And you had the Clintons explaining that you've got to respect the wishes of the people. You can't follow an artificial line on a map that was drawn long ago. America stands for self-determination. But then when the people of Crimea voted to join Russia, and Putin accepted people in who wanted to be Russian, and who were part of Russia until about 1954, when they were detached from Russia by the arbitrary decision of a communist dictator against the wishes of the people, suddenly that line became sacred to the American State Department. And no longer was it a matter of American concern that the wishes of the people on the ground be violated. No, it was more important that that artificial line be maintained. And these examples show just how corrupt and how insincere this system is. Now, what should our goal be? I must say that I place very little hope in the Trump movement. I'm delighted by the Trump phenomenon, but I am concerned that after the Trump campaign is over or the Trump presidency over, many of our people get discouraged. I hear people saying things like, Trump is our last hope. He is not our last hope. This struggle can go on for centuries, if necessary, before we detach ourselves and have our own country. Estonians never said, when the Soviets occupied them, well, that was our last hope. Estonia is over. Europeans have a healthier attitude on that kind of thing. They know that a government is not the same thing as a people. There's a government in Washington that rules a geographical stretch of land. That geographical stretch of land is occupied by a number of contending nations. That government and its borders are not what determine what an American is. And all of us who know the meaning of a word like an all-American boy or an all-American girl know that a Haitian who has just waded ashore in Florida is not and cannot be an American in the historic sense. We must never we must think in long terms and fundamental terms. We must understand that we are seeking to establish a new system. We're not trying to go back to any kind of alleged golden age under Eisenhower. We're not seeking to restore states' rights. We're not seeking to restore the Constitution, a French Enlightenment document, which admittedly it was a pretty good system of government if you didn't take race into account. We're seeking something entirely new. And we need to be thinking about what our ethno-state will be. And I alluded to Chilton Williamson's column in Chronicles. He raised some interesting points that need to be addressed. Who would be acceptable as a citizen of our new ethno-state, and who would be excluded? Could Hillary Clinton show up at the gate and say, well, you know, I made allusions to race when I was running against Barack Obama in the Pennsylvania primary in 2008, which she did. And you know, I have a lot of experience as Secretary of State. Just look at all my marvelous experience in foreign policy, marvelous things like voting for the Iraq War and all the benefits that that war has brought Iraq and us. Marvelous things like overthrowing Gaddafi and all the benefits that came from that. I have a wealth of experience, and I'm white too. In fact, I'm blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Are you going to say, that's great, Hillary, all is forgiven, come back in? As I said, never give up on racial comrade, but there are some like Hillary and Angela Merkel that have gone a bridge too far. We are very blessed. Whenever you think about the sacrifices and the risks, remember that the people in this room are actual living human beings. They are not zombies. They're not the living dead shopping in the Kmart or the Target. We have a past, we have a present, we have a future. We have friends like Cicero, who lived 2,000 years ago. We have comrades all over. We have a people in whom we live and breathe. We have a culture. We have a history. We have a civilization. People like Angela Merkel don't have that. Angela Merkel, she may be a sociopath, as so many people in public office, like John Edwards, the senator from North Carolina, and the things we learned about him. There's a high rate of sociopathy in public office. These are intelligent sociopaths who know how to conceal their crimes or stay just within the boundary of the law, but who are sociopathic. I recommend to all of you a book by a woman who teaches at Harvard called The Sociopath Next Door. It's a very important book that you can read in 2 hours. Excellent, excellent book. Angela Merkel is not like us. She has no people. She shows that when she does things like, how many here have heard of Bjorn Höcke? Anybody here heard of Bjorn Höcke? Raise your hands. I urge you to Google him. It's a funny spelling. It's like the Swedish French name Bjorn. I think it's Bjoern, and the last name is Höcke, Hoecke in English. He's a member of one of the state legislatures in Germany, and he has emerged as an elected public official, a Congress, their provinces are more important than our state. He's emerged as the leading and most articulate opponent of Angela Merkel's program of colonizing her own country with aliens. As a result, you can hear him online, he's a magnificent person. Really, as a friend of mine said, she said he looks so normal. I mean, he's got a wife and 4 kids, and he speaks well, and he looks good, and he's just a great guy. Well, Angela has now stripped him of his parliamentary immunity because she believes that she has the right to jail people who oppose her policies. This is the freedom of the free world. You're not going to hear about that on CNN. You're not going to read an editorial in the New York Times about that because they like this. And they know that they need the silent treatment to cover up the real Angela, this tyrannical, dictatorial woman violating the most fundamental First Amendment right you can imagine, the right of a member of the German Congress to speak his mind without fear of prosecution, a right in which our Anglo-Saxon idea of freedom of speech has its taproot, because it first emerged in the idea that the king should not be able to prosecute a member of parliament for anything that the member of parliament said in his office. Angela has no place. Angela has no people. She made an amazing statement that I saw her making, in which she said that if Germany declined to allow itself to be settled by all of these aliens that she's bringing in, then ich bin kein Deutscher. And said the little priggish, self-righteous way, I am not a German. Well, I've got news for Angela. You are not a German right now. You're not a European right now. Angela Merkel is about the worst traitor in the history of Germany. I used to give people an award when I was young and frisky and had more time. I called it the Malian Ephialtes Award. I sent it one time to little Ralph Reed. I got no reply. Does anyone here know who the Malian Ephialtes? How many hands know the Malian Ephialtes? Well, you will all remember the story of when Leonidas and those brave Spartans were holding back the Persians at Thermopylae, that someone showed the Persians the back route so that they could take Leonidas, a Greek traitor. We are fortunate to know the name of that traitor. His name is the Malian Ephialtes. And I am confident that the name of Angela Merkel will go down in history and even trump the name of the Malian Ephialtes as the supreme representative of the traitor to Germany and the traitor to Europe. She has no country. She will never have a country. There will be no place for her in the future Europe. She has forfeited any right to share the inheritance of people like brave Bjorn Herka, who are fighting for a new Europe and a new world that is truly going to come. My race is my nation. This is an important maxim that we must all remember. Like that young man from Estonia said, we are a family with many different nationalities in it. But like the Panhellenic Greek ideal, and like the idea of medieval Christendom, we remember that we are both Americans or Southerners or Englishmen or Estonians or Germans or Russians. We are all of those things, but we're also Europeans and white Europeans and largely Christians. That overarching idea has been lost in the bloody fratricidal wars, the two devastating Peloponnesian wars of our own times in the last century. But that is the ideal toward which we struggle. And as I've said before, I believe that we are racial idealists and not race realists. We are racialists. We are racial nationalists. We are not conservatives. We are not liberals. We are not left. We are not right. We are racial nationalists. And all white people, with a few exceptions like Angela and Merkel and Hillary Clinton, are members of our race, even those who right now don't know that. I am happy that I have done my duty to the extent I have. I wish I had done more. I often ask people, when did you first become enlightened or become a thought criminal? I can say truthfully that I was a thought criminal from birth. I can never remember a moment in which I did not love my race and was not concerned about it. As a child, I was concerned about how people looked and different races and the extraordinary difference that I saw in the area of South Carolina that my grandmother lived, which was 95% black and 5% white, the extraordinary difference between the races. I loved my race as a child. I loved it in high school. I loved it in high school when I foolishly spoke up and argued with left-wing high school teachers. I loved it as a college student when I was an activist in the Union of the American People, which we had at the University of Georgia. I loved it as a law student. I have loved it throughout my professional career, and I love it in retirement and in old age. And I will always love it. And I hope that I will be able to say, as I am dying, as Admiral Nelson said as he was dying, thank God I have done my duty. Thank you. No question. No question.
Well, Mr. Dickson has indeed done his duty. This brings our conference to a close, and may the spirit of our people go with you, and you will know your brothers and your sisters by the brightness of their eyes.